Hi, so I'm delighted to be here talking to Ben, Katie, and Baktash about Champions of the Golden Valley, a film that I saw in Tribeca, and I was charmed. I was surprised. I was heartbroken,
Mm.
all by turns as I was watching it. And now, of course, it is once again an incredibly timely story. So I have lots of questions about the evolution of the film and what you learned. But I guess first, just out of curiosity, for Ben and Katie, what challenges did you face, if any, filming in Afghanistan? Did you have to sneak your cameras in? Was there mistrust when you first showed up? Like, what was that sort of initial experience like for you?
Yeah, the really interesting thing about this production is when you go somewhere far away like Afghanistan, you might be concerned that you're going to have a lot of issues, that security is going to be a major concern. And, we did have those struggles, but in retrospect, I'm just so struck by how easy and how open it was to film there. Because the community is so incredible and so welcoming and so warm. Like we were very quickly like brought into the fold of this amazing village in Bamiyan, and they just brought us up into the mountains behind their homes, and they were so excited to share their world of mountains behind their houses, where they would shepherd in the summers, and in the winters they would ski. And there was this almost just this exchange of sharing like our mutual love for skiing. And we just very quickly got to know one another. And of course, you're operating in the mountains, you're carrying heavy stuff up into the peaks, you're navigating avalanche terrain. But being able to do that with these amazing young athletes, these amazing guys who were so enthusiastic about showing their backyards was incredibly special. So, it's been 6 years now since I filmed, and I I think maybe I've just forgotten all the difficult parts, but I just remember the fun times I had in the mountains with these guys.
And tell me what you learned from not just the skiers, but their families and the whole community. Maybe
Mm.
something that surprised you.
Honestly, there's so much to learn from the people of Afghanistan. Their resilience, their joy. There's just like the pure love of being in nature was just so profound and so pure there. I'd say, in America, I spent a lot of time, going to ski resorts, and there's a little bit more. There's a lot of money involved when you're skiing in the United States. There's a lot of fur coats and that kind of thing. And there, it's just like, okay, people are out on their wooden skis and their plastic galosh boots, and they're cold as hell, but they're just having the best time of their lives. And it really reminded me of like the pure joy that you can have when you're engaging in sport, when you're outside, when you're with community and really good friends. And so that purity, I think, is what really has stuck with me and reminded me that I call back to that all the time, thinking about like, okay, don't take this for granted. It's wonderful to be outside with your friends.
I am guessing, and not really guessing, but imagine that the film evolved and changed
Mm.
over time, that it wasn't exactly the film that you set out to make. So who would like to talk about that?
I can speak to that. It's so interesting with documentaries, you well know. I sometimes envy a narrative screenwriter who can write what happens on the next page, whereas we've been on this journey for more than 6 years, and we set out to tell a different story about Afghanistan. And it was a vibrant portrait of a mountain culture. And we were so impressed with their resourcefulness, their joy, and the strength of their community, rival villages coming together through sport. It was just for us, that was a story we set out to tell. And of course, over the course of time with the world events, with the Taliban takeover, with the collapse of Kabul in August 2021, which we know you are familiar with, and we were all had a front row seat in the most harrowing way, the story changed. And we watched the Bamiyan athletes be displaced in such an alarming way. And because we had captured their community intact, we felt a deep sense of responsibility to show the really hard reality of what it meant for Ali Shah and his family to leave with no notice, with their backpack and their children's in their arms, and start over in a new place. And I think a lot of people, we have a lot of divisive rhetoric and narratives about the refugee experience. And what we thought is to honor this community, we want to show their joy, because I do believe that people are more willing to empathize with people's suffering if they can also take part in their joy. And as Ben was saying, their community was just so rich in culture, in family, in recreation, in beauty, and they never wanted to leave their home. And so what we wanted to show was this contrast. And so yes, this was not the film we set out to make. It started as a shorter project in scope, but we're so proud of the film it has become, because I think this is the story the world needs to hear right now. I think it offers something in the conversation that you don't get in, the media.
Yeah, and I have some additional questions about that, but I want to get Baktash into the conversation here. You've dedicated your career to telling stories about Afghanistan. It is your heritage, I think it's fair to say. What does this film contribute, do you think, that is new or necessary?
Yeah, I think just to kind of piggyback off what Katie's saying is, given the current zeitgeist and what's happening, I think this film is really about offering a different perspective of Afghanistan, of Afghans, of who they are, what they're about, what they value. I think the narrative of Afghanistan since 9/11 has been really about what this place brings out as a matter of terrorism, as a matter of extremism, as a matter of really the most difficult, the most stringent ways of thinking about the world. And so what this film does is it gives a new perspective of what Afghanistan has to offer. And anybody who spent time in Afghanistan knows that this is part of the experience of being there. And so that's what I love most about this film, is it gives a different perspective of who the Afghan people are. And I think it's even more prescient given the moment of where we are in terms of how refugees are kind of being, well, the way people are talking about refugees right now. And so I think our film offers a wonderful catalyst for conversation about what people have lost. I mean, specifically, Ellen, just to name this for us, Afghans lived in fear when the Taliban took over. And they've come to the United States now, and they're still living in fear. They don't have a sense of a roadmap of what's going to happen to them. And so I think this film really is a wonderful way to not only offer a new perspective, one of hope and joy and resilience of the Afghan people, but also allows for a conversation about how we'll be in relationship with refugees going forward.
Right. And the film begins with Alicia, saying I think he says, my hope is gone. And then later he talks about, being reduced to being seen as just a risk. And so, that really, it's heartbreaking, right? Because people don't see you as a whole human being, and particularly now in this country, with the president saying that he wants to investigate or examine all the Afghan people that are here. I mean, these people fled. They didn't want to leave their country. They were forced to leave. And those who came here are contributing in immense ways to the tapestry of this country, right? So
yeah, that's exactly
that's
right.
so good.
Katie, I'd love to share that, like, the wholeness of a human being. What's interesting is a lot of these folks were somebody in their homeland. Ali Shah, our protagonist in our film, he was a coach. He was a mentor. He was a hero in many ways, right? That's what we were able to capture and show. And then he comes to Germany, just like so many other Afghans that have come to the United States, and they're reduced to not just being a refugee, but they're not even seen as being valuable. And Katie, you wanted to say something, but I think that's really important just to name, is that they are more than just being a refugee.
Yeah, what I wanted to add is that, we worked actively on the evacuation, and we didn't personally get Ali Shah out of Afghanistan, but we worked very closely with veterans and NGOs and international governments to support the extraction of the women's ski team and other members of the ski club. And we partnered with a German NGO and were able to get a number of people out of Afghanistan. And we actually, during that time, kind of had the footage of Bamiyan in 2019 and almost put it on the shelf. We said, oh, that charming footage and film, like maybe that will never see the light of day. And there was a really poignant conversation with Ali Shah where he says, when I'm in the supermarket, which again, then we kind of filmed this with him in Germany, but he said, people just look at me and just think, you're a refugee, you're not German, you don't belong. And he just said, I wish they knew I was a skier. I wish they knew I was a coach. And as you just think about that, what is it about? How can we use this film to create curiosity about people's stories and their lives before? And I think when he said that, that's when Ben Baktash and I thought, okay, this is going to be a different film. But what if we could show people that? And that's really what we've tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned briefly women. And, I was excited to see that the race included women, and they were women who were not just, I mean, they weren't actually women from that village, but from around the world, I think, and also different parts of Afghanistan.
Mostly
From
Bamiyan.
around the Bamiyan region,
Yeah,
yeah.
mostly Bamiyan
Okay.
City. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about, what you saw with the women and their fate.
Yeah, that was really honestly the most progressive part of this beautiful operation that Ali Shah built. He was very, very much pushing the women's ski team. He was also working with there was a marathon in Bamiyan, so women were running. And there were just a lot of activity around getting women involved in sports. And that throughout the entirety of Afghanistan, that was quite a progressive and novel thing. And there was yeah, he was just really pushing things forward in a really beautiful way. And ultimately, that is why he was targeted by the Taliban and had to leave the country because of his involvement in women's sports. So, and for the women themselves, like it was really just amazing to see because, we're all familiar with the plight of the Afghan women and how much they've been through and how much their rights have been systematically eroded, particularly since, the latest Taliban regime. And so to be able to see them on the slopes was so inspiring. It honestly puts joy in my heart to like see those first turns as they came like down during the competition, and just everyone had the most massive smiles on their face, like men and women alike, because they knew what it meant. They knew the power of that moment and the power of seeing women being able to show what they're capable of doing. And it was really inspiring just to the entire community. And there was so much media that was coming out of that moment just within Afghanistan. People were watching that footage around the country and, inspiring all their, the people throughout the whole country. So it was really beautiful to see that.
Yeah, and again, that same contrast is that what is not possible now, because right now only the boys are allowed to ski in Afghanistan, and women are unable to speak in public, sing, work, play sports. The list of edicts is endless. And I think, we're very proud we've launched a robust impact campaign for the last year and a half. We're partnered with a number of wonderful organizations that actively are working to support Afghan women who have left, Afghan women who are still in Afghanistan. But I think for us, the movie, it was so important to weave the thread of the women through there because, again, it shows that contrast. But, this isn't like generational memory. This isn't like 50 years ago. This was 6 years ago when we were filmed, 4 years ago, they were skiing in this Afghan ski challenge. And so these are young women have those memories. And so it's interesting to think about, there's so many wonderful organizations working to empower and support Afghan women this time. But it is incredibly harrowing. And as Baktash said, there's just no roadmap. The future is very uncertain for them. And we hope our film brings awareness.
And where are the women now? The women that, the skiers that had to flee. I'm just curious about where they wound up.
Yeah.
And, do they still dream of going back?
Yeah, we were really conscientious of this in the process. So every woman showed in the film is out of Afghanistan. And they're all over the world, to say it in a blanket way. And I think every Afghan we have met who had to flee in that time dreams to go back. I mean, that's one of the first words in the film. I am dreaming to go back. And we've had we've shown the film to a number of other the skiers, of course, but the other athletes from Bamiyan. There were cyclists, there were climbers, swimmers, and they were all part of our evacuation efforts. And one of them said, when I watched your movie, I felt like I was home. I could smell Bamiyan, and those memories have been so cut off since I left. And just to feel like I could immerse back into this beautiful homeland. But yes, I think the dream is always to return. And I think what is possible has a lot of uncertainty.
I don't want to be on the dark side for this entire conversation.
Sure, sure, sure.
As much as I want people to, really feel into what this film is saying.
Yeah.
But I also want to praise aspects of the filmmaking and ask you about it. One is the playfulness that you, Ben, were able to bring between the skiers, particularly uh, the front runners, right? And getting them to stand next to each other and, encouraging them to be up close and personal when maybe they wouldn't want to do that. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, yeah, and on the note of what you were just saying about the darkness, I think for me the way to counter that and the way that this film works to counter that is by showing the humanity and the warmth and the joy of these people in Afghanistan and getting, Americans, Westerners to be able to connect with that and see themselves reflected in just the pure human emotions of these people, right? So that's what we really tried to do with the film is just to show how warm and how lovely and just wonderful this community is and to look around and almost like as I want Americans to see like, wow, I want that. I want that sense of community and joy, right? That's something that we can actually aspire to. And that's such a role reversal because in the minds of so many, it's just like, wow, Afghans would like to be here. We have everything in America. And it's like, no, they have such a rich and vibrant culture there. And that's actually something we can learn from, we can be inspired by. And so, the film really, to go back to your point, is it's about trying to bring that out, and we tried everything we could to kind of show that warmth and humanity of the community, and we tried to. It's packaged in the sense of a sports film, right? And it's almost like this classic, age-old tale, David versus Goliath, Rocky, these sports films that we can all get behind, and really, those films work because they're fables, they're it's the legends, it's the hero's journey, right? And what we really wanted to do was build this community up and some of these athletes up as heroes, and to give at least from the Western audience's perspective, a hero to root for in Afghanistan, which is just again that just you don't see that very often. So that was really the goal, and we stylized the film. Everything about it was like working towards that goal of just really showing this almost mythical sense of these sportsmen and they're shepherds living in the mountains and with very little resources, but they're able to do so much, and their physicality and stamina and strength and excitement is just so visceral that you feel that as an audience and you connect with that in the same way that Americans are obsessed with going to sports events. Like you see that play out in the exact same way, and you're like, wow, we have so much more in common than I necessarily thought. So that was really our goal when we were on the ground and we were just shooting those initial, the initial part of the production in Afghanistan. We had no idea that the whole refugee component was going to come into play, of course, and so that was really the goal, was to just make a mythical, heroic sports film.
And something I want to share is that, like, yes, it's stylized, but that was also the culture. Like, Mushtaba brought honor to his family. Like, you see him cross the finish line and he prays. Like, this is a big deal for them to win the Afghan ski challenge. And so it's not like we had to, prop that up or like, it was really like the innate dynamics. Actually, a funny anecdote is like, Mushtaba, Ali Shah had kind of, whispered, he's the champ. He's kind of the front runner. And so they were filming with Mushtaba for a few days, and that shot where Hussein Ali in the pink jumpsuit cuts him off. I mean, that was like totally unscripted, and he was like, no, I'm the guy. I'm the guy you should be filming. These guys are coming in with their cameras, like, film me. I'm the main character. And so like that, that teenage boy rivalry is already like innate. But it is like amazing to, I'm from Colorado, Ben's from Alaska. We are all of us are mountain people on this team, and we love the mountains and we feel at home in the mountains. And so just to remember that we all build up these narratives of these stark differences we might have. And I think that's the power of film, is it shortens the distance in our understanding of that. And I love that one of my favorite scenes is the wooden ski race and the kids just giggling and laughing and, tumbling down the finish line. And it's like, we all want to see smiles on children's faces, and we want to see our loved ones playing, laughing, learning, giggling in the snow. And it's so human. And it's kind of like, for us, that shared humanity piece has always been a through line. And so, yes, like I will say that like the Afghan ski challenge in Bamiyan was already mythical. Like it was already something that created such like purpose and motivation for everyone there.
Absolutely. On a different note, Mustafa's dad, I think Mustafa's dad, right? Speak
Yeah.
in the film. And he also was very much about, inclusiveness and love. And I think Mustafa says somewhere, if it had not been for, like, he said, skiing is like a university for living. And it brought me closer to people who might have seemed, different or like not in tune with my thinking. Or, I mean, I think he might have even said I might have seen some people as infidels, but I don't. Right. And that was profound for me, that a sport could do that, right? Could sort of take you out of your tiny bubble and allow you to see, also the wider world outside of your village, right? So
Yeah.
that was interesting to me, and to hear from his dad, who is a religious man. Yeah.
So for me, that scene actually is the linchpin of the whole film. And
It was Ali Shah.
Yep.
Not Mushaba. It's Ali Shah.
Yeah, there's a mullah who shares his story, and he's talking about how he shares a beautiful poem. Maybe you remember the exact poem, Bakhtash, but basically he sits down with a large a room full of school children, and he just tells them, essentially there's like more. We have so much more in common than we have apart, and and it is important to like learn the ways and the customs of other people who are different from us, so that we can learn how to live our own lives better. And we can't live a beautiful life unless we understand other people and learn to connect with them and learn what makes them tick and understand our similarities as human beings. And so that was such an amazing. I think it's a linchpin scene in the film, but also it was my favorite scene when filming, because basically we had a very small crew. We had a crew of 3, and one of them was out skiing, and myself and the other cinematographer were just wandering around this village, just filming scenic stuff and beautiful things. And we got ushered into this room. We didn't have a translator with us, and we sat down, came into this room, and there was like 50 school children and this mullah in the center, and all the kids were praying and reading from the Quran. And we were like, wow, this just looks visually stunning. And we just started to film it. And then after a few minutes, the mullah quieted everyone down, and he gathered everyone around him, and we understood that he was like, I want to tell something to the class here. And I just remember I started filming him, and I didn't know, I had no idea what he was saying, but I could feel the energy in the room was just absolutely electric, and everyone was just so intently paying attention to what he had to say. And I could just feel this sense of just togetherness and community and just like deep understanding, as like real wisdom was being transmuted to these kids. And I didn't know what it meant, but I could feel it. And then months later, we had that material translated, and I was like, oh my God, this is the thesis of our whole film. This is what it's all about. It's about, it's so hopeful, because it's passing this idea of just a wider global community, and why it's so important to understand one another to this younger generation. And that becomes the story of the film, and it becomes, at its core, it's also the story of competition. Like through the act of competition, you get to know one another better, and you get to understand one another, and so that works on so many different levels. And there's the element of education, which is so pivotal to Afghanistan as well. So yeah, that scene, I just love it, because in the moment it was just so impactful, and then as the story went on, I realized how important it was to the structure of the film as well.
Yeah. And I will say, just a note on the skiing as a school to learn living, and the kind of comment about the infidels. Ali Shah did also grow up as a shepherd, and he's the one who says that line. And he talks about how it was like intrepid skiers, like Italians and the Swiss people who were skiing in Afghanistan, who he met first, and that's kind of how he learned how to ski. And so it was through sport and through friendship, like that language of skiing. You know, Ali Shah taught himself English with a dictionary after he met these tourists who came and skied in his mountains. But it's, you know, it just, it reinforces, you know, and I think we all feel that about travel, about sport, just things that can shift your perspective.
And if I may share, I think that's all right. And what's interesting is that we see this in other parts of our lives here in the West. What do I mean? We understand this with soccer.
Mhm.
If you look at the French, the Spanish teams, the German teams, if you look at the lineup of those players, they're from all over the world. Like we've seen this and we know this. And what's really special about I think what we've captured with Champions of the Golden Valley is that we're showing that with a community in a remote part of Bamyan, uh, implementing and learning a sport that is perceived to be very privileged. It's inaccessible to so many people, and yet they've been able to cultivate it. And I think that's the special. I think that's what makes this film really special in terms of the power and the diplomatic power of sport. Ellen, is that we've been able to kind of be witness to that. Does that make sense?
It does. It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah, I mean, I loved seeing that. That was the surprise for me. Wait, what? They're skiing? They're having a ski competition? Wait, there's women there. You know, just everything kind of blew my mind all at once. You
Yeah.
know, I think that, you know, it opens a window
Mm.
into a country that seems very foreign and distant and maybe sort of dangerous in some way. And it, you know, this film sort of turns that on its head in a
Mm.
really welcome way. And yeah, I also really love the other, you know, when you showed the cave and the destruction of the Buddha
Mhm.
in the cave. And um, you know, it's not a Buddhist country, but but destroying a cultural touchstone like that, you know, is sort of part of the Taliban's tactic. You know, there's physical destruction and then there's psychic destruction. Um, and yet, you know, the people are, as you say, resilient and, you know, will not allow themselves to be defeated. And as one of the girls in a film that I made said, she was on a robotics team. She said, we cannot turn the clock back. The Taliban can't take from us what we've already earned.
Mm.
Um, and I
And
love that.
and in that same spirit, we hope that's what our film does, Ellen. We hope that our film is an act of defiance to make sure that that history is not erased, that that collective history and that collective memory is not erased.
Mm.
Like this place does exist and these values do exist amongst these people. And when Afghans, like I think this may resonate with Ben and Katie's, when we show this film to Afghans around, around the United States and even in Europe, the best feeling is when an Afghan comes to us and say, "Man, your film really spoke to me. It really spoke to me in a way, and it transported me back to that place." And I think that's the gift that we've learned that matters the most in terms of giving it back to the Afghan people.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say that has been the most profound and impactful part of this whole process, but has been sharing it with Afghan audiences. And actually, this time last year, we were at the Anchorage International Film Festival. I'm from Alaska, and so we had our hometown screening in Anchorage, Alaska, which was very cool. But we worked with a refugee relocation organization there, and they brought what 40 some Afghans to
90.
yeah. Really? Well, it was like just it felt like the room was half full of Afghans, and many of them had, so they left in 2021, and many of them had never been to a theater. And so for the first time, they're coming into a theater and they're seeing their homeland shown in such a beautiful and yeah, just well portrayed way. Like it looked like it is such a beautiful place, and they could feel that and see that on the big screen and share that with their new neighbors in this community that they were trying to integrate into. And it was the most powerful and moving experience I think we've had showing the film, just because they just felt like finally the community that they were in could understand where they were coming from and they could feel their pride to see their homeland and all that they left behind. So that was incredibly powerful and meaningful for us all.
Yeah, many of our screenings, we've been able to work with partners to get Afghan refugees from the community there. And then it's this beautiful intersection between Afghans and people who are living there that don't know a lot about their new neighbors. And there's this opportunity to be curious about their homeland. Actually, at the Alaska screening, we had Ali Shah with us, which was so amazing. And we had a luncheon with homemade Afghan food and this incredible, it was just, we've had so many meaningful experiences sharing this film and being able, we all can stream films on our laptops at home, but there's something so magical when you create community in an audience with the power of film.
And in that same spirit, I think it's important just to name that after the collapse of the country in 2021, there are 100,000 Afghan refugees in America right now. 100,000 spread across the country. And so we hope that our film acts as a catalyst where communities can show this film to bring their Afghan neighbors into the theater and understand what has been lost, quite literally what has been lost. And I love that Katie's brought this up a few times, is that we want people to have this sense of curiosity about who Afghans are and what they've lost. Yeah, and there's one other point that I wanted to mention too, in terms of like this moment, Ellen. It's early December 2025. We've just recently had that shooting in Washington, D.C. And so the other thing I think we want audiences to remember is that this film hopefully captures this for folks, is that we want people to understand the difference between the actions of one individual and the broader reality of Afghan refugees in America today, right? Without getting too political, I think that's something that's really important just to name for us.
Yeah, the film isn't political, and yet it's very political. So I love that about it. And thank you all for taking this time and for making this beautiful film.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Ellen.
so much,
Thank you so
Ellen.
very much.